You've probably heard mentioned a couple of times since we began the inclusive teaching and learning. For those of you who haven't quite heard of this change, at the start of this term, our Directorate, Disability Policy and Programs, which Ian May leads, changed to the Inclusive Teaching and Learning Directorate. Had anyone heard of that change? You have? Lots of shaking heads and a couple of nods. At about the same time, our division, so the group of directorates that we work with, so there's us, there's engagement and wellbeing, and there's student support services. And student support services are the ones that work in schools, the special educators, the speechies, all those guys. We're all one division, and we used to be called Early Years and Child Development, but because they set up a new Office of Early Years, they decided that name was no longer apt, so they changed the name of our division to Support and Inclusion. So I am now Stuart Kitto, Senior Advisor Leadership for Inclusion in the Inclusive Teaching and Learning Directorate in the Support and Inclusion Division. It's a good thing I don't have any business cards because it would all be taken up by the label. I've been asked to spend the next 35 minutes with you doing a workshopy kind of thing on inclusion. And I think that was kind of the brief that I was given, a workshopy thing on inclusion. In my role, I get to work with lots of schools and leaders and people in our department, helping them think about how they can meet the needs of all of their learners and how they can strengthen their systems and practices to help them meet the needs of all learners more effectively and more consistently. Now, I'm aware that my perspective is as a former principal. I was a principal in Whyalla and Woomera and Tintinara and Murray Bridge. So I was mostly rural and remote settings and really fun places to be and live. I'm aware that many of you have a perspective that I don't have, that your lived experience of family with disability is something that I am adjacent to, but it isn't part of my lived identity. And so I'm hoping to be able to use this time to pick your collective brains and learn from you, because I have lots of research and evidence and briefing papers and documents and podcasts and all kinds of things that I give to school leaders saying, have you thought of this? Have you considered this? How about you try this? Did that work? How about you do this instead next time? And it's really helpful being able to share stories from parent perspectives as well, because it helps our people in schools who are incredibly busy. We as a society, we never take anything off of our schools. We never say, you don't need to do this anymore, it's okay. What we do instead is we say, oh, actually, you've got to do this as well, and this as well, and this as well. And so it's helpful being able to give them some extra perspectives to help them in their thinking. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that this is Kaurna land, that it always has been and always will be. It has never been ceded, and I'd like to acknowledge any Aboriginal people here today and recognise that the Kaurna people are the custodians of this place. I'd like you to start, we're going to start with a little bit of reflection, as long as this works. We're all familiar with QR codes. When I tested it, it worked. If you've got your QR code reader handy, could you try scanning that? If it doesn't work, you can go to the website instead. Okay. A very misunderstood concept, it's not just proximity. Enabling everyone to participate, being valued, able to learn, interact with peers, belonging, the opposite of exclusion. I had an earlier version of my presentation where I had a joke saying that people who write not exclusion would get told off, but that's okay. Acceptance, a human right and challenging to implement. Yes. Okay. I wonder if I can do this and go to the next one. Can you, if the poll will work, so there's a poll open? Yep. Fantastic. Can you share a time when your child was authentically included? So don't write a paragraph, Write some of the words, where, when. This is when your child, the person that's made you come along today, when they really belonged. When they had that sense of, yeah, I fit here, I'm known, I'm seen. Who did the thing that made them feel included? What was it about that thing that made them feel included? What were the feelings that they had? What feelings did it bring you as an adult in their lives? Relief. The bigger the word is, the more time that's been put in. As someone who set up a Minecraft server in a school I was in 2012, and this is in a small country town where football was king, and those young boys who for the first time they had all of the cool knowledge, they knew how everything worked. And this was, I think, version 1.3.7, very early days of Minecraft, for those of you who play it. And the least cool kids in the school were suddenly the coolest kids in the school for about a term. And it is a beautiful thing to see, particularly in small country towns where your quirky kids don't always get appreciated by their peers. It was wonderful. As a parent, I really enjoyed it because I have quirky kids. The things that made it happen were being a safe space, understanding, social groups, environments being modified. That's a really helpful thing to consider. I didn't realise how much I needed my environment to be modified until I started working in an open plan office. Because as a principal, I had an office with a door. And so when things were noisy, I could just shut the door. And I'd now sit in the middle of a floor with 80 workstations. And working from home is amazing because it means that at least a quarter of them aren't there on any given day. But it made me realise that even my classrooms as a teacher that I thought were fairly calm and controlled, I would not be able to work in them. And I'm an adult with multiple degrees and lots of really good self-regulation strategies, but I have found that I need really expensive noise-cancelling headphones so that I can get anything done in the office. And I'm not particularly sensory sensitive, but we have classrooms where we have 30 kids where we expect them to be able to do things that many of us as adults can't do. Many of you will be familiar with this. Who is familiar with General Comment 4 of the United Nations? Okay. If you're paying attention to the Royal Commission at the moment, you'll be aware that the UN Committee on the Rights of People with Disability in 2016 wrote General Comment 4, and this says that inclusive education is a process of systemic reform embodying changes and modifications in content, teaching methods, approaches, structures and strategies in education to overcome barriers with a vision serving to provide all students of the relevant age range with an equitable and participatory learning experience and environment that best corresponds to their requirements and preferences. You can tell this was written by a committee because that is one sentence. But this is part of a convention that our government has signed up to. This is worth highlighting and remembering when you are talking to peers, when you're talking in schools, because this is the vision for inclusive education. And this is the global perspective. This isn't just in our state. This is what the international authorities say. This is the kind of direction we should be going. Inclusive education is about how our system strives to overcome barriers and fulfil our vision of being able to provide every child with the opportunity to be and to belong and to learn with their peers, with the environment and the mode and experiences that are right for them. Inclusive education is not integration, where kids are dumped at the back of the classroom and told that they can be there as long as they fit in with what we need them to do. That is not the kind of thing that we want to see for any of our kids. It is about rethinking the schooling and classroom experiences so that school is the right fit for more of us. Back after World War II, planes in the US Air Force got really, really powerful really, really quickly. And they had a problem because they were discovering that despite having these massively highly trained pilots and these amazing aircraft, too many pilots were losing control and crashing. And it is really expensive in terms of training when you are losing 17 planes to accidents and pilot error in a day. That's not in combat, that's just, oops, the ground arrived too quickly, or I thought I was here and I was there. And when they looked into what was going on, they discovered that it wasn't the plane that was breaking, well, it broke when it crashed, but the cause of the accident was pilots missing warning lights, or reacting too slowly, or pushing the wrong button, or pulling the wrong lever, or doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. It was pilot error. And these were highly skilled pilots, experienced in combat, making what looked like dumb mistakes. So, as any organisation does, when things aren't working the way that it does, they reorganise, they reform, they rethink what they're doing. And they thought, well, maybe the reason why they missed these warnings, these notes, is because we've designed the cockpit in the wrong size. The cockpits were all designed around some measurements that they'd taken in 1926 when they first started building planes. And they decided to check, well, maybe over the last 15, 20, 25 years, people have got bigger. Maybe our pilots today are different to what they were when we first designed them, and our cockpits are the wrong shape. So they got hold of an Air Force base, 4,063 pilots, and they measured every single one. They were all men, they'd all been pre-selected to be pilots, so they managed to fit in a certain fairly narrow set of criteria. And they measured 140 different elements on every single person. They measured thumb length, they measured the distance from the elbow to the hand, they measured the distance between the eyes, they measured how far the eyes are from the ears, how far the nose is from the chin. You name it, they measured it. And once they'd done all of this, they looked at the 10 measures that they thought, I reckon these are the ones that are going to be causing our pilots to make mistakes. Let's find out the average for these, and let's make sure that our cockpits can fit the average person. And they went for the middle 30%. They didn't say, you've got to be exactly 5'9". They had a little bit of leeway. Because the average pilot in these 4,063, Paul, was 5'9". But 30% of them, a whole third of the group, was between 5'7" and 5'11". So that was the range. When they'd got these 10 measures and they'd worked out all of the averages, one of their smart aleck young lieutenants said, I wonder how many of our pilots are average. And there were 4,063 pilots in this group, and they're only looking at 10 measures. Who thinks it was 70? Put your hand on your head if you think 75% of this group might have been average. 50% might have been average on these 10 measures. 25%. 10%. 5% out of these 45,000. None, not one. Not one of these 4,063 pilots was in the average range for those 10 measurements. And even if you took just 3 of those measurements, less than 4% of that group was average. So in designing their cockpits for the average person, they were designing cockpits that did not suit a single person. I think you can see where I'm going with this around our classrooms and our schools. For too long, lots of our classrooms and our schools have been designed around an average person. So what they did was they actually banned average, and they then demanded that, the US Air Force demanded that all of their aircraft manufacturers would design cockpits that 95% of pilots could fit in. So they needed to come up with adjustable seats. The reason your car has an adjustable seat is because of the US Air Force. Seat belts, things, all those levers and things, they made them adjustable. And it didn't change the purpose. It didn't make the planes less effective, it made them more effective. By removing barriers, by designing adjustments and meeting the priority, meeting the need that was real, we have all benefited, and the pilots who are flying their planes benefited because they crashed less. So why inclusion? For those who can't read it, that is a real photo that came across my Twitter feed yesterday. To use the disabled lift, please come upstairs to the buffet and notify a member of staff so we can turn the power on, thank you. This is incredibly common, and I'm not telling you, if you have any friends in chairs, you know this is almost every day you'll see a situation like this. I know this discussion is something that many of you are familiar with. You are here because you are advocates and supporters of your children, and you're looking for ways, I think, that you can advocate for the kind of education that is the right fit for your child. I have 3 children of my own. My oldest daughter is about to finish her second year of university, as long as she gets her assignment in tomorrow. My older son is heading off to school. He's in Victor Harbour tomorrow. I'm feeling very old. And my youngest son is about to transition to high school. My hopes and dreams for these 3 very different children are actually the same. I want them to be happy, I want them to be connected, and I want them to have somewhere that they feel that they belong. If that's what they have, then I am a happy man. I don't care anything apart from them being happy, connected and belonging. And I suspect that I'm not alone in having those kind of dreams for my children. I think it is fundamental to us as parents that we want our children to be connected to the world and happy. Many of you would have heard of Kelly Vincent, would remember her as a Member of Parliament. Do any of you know about the book she wrote earlier this year? Okay, so she wrote a book called Dandelion Heart. Thank you for your feedback, I really appreciate that, thank you. And this is a collection of poems and essays on her experiences as a human being, part of which is as a high-profile person with a disability, with a visible disability, and also with an invisible one, as she has autism, as well as cerebral palsy. It's actually a beautifully written collection of essays and stories. It's only $10. You can get it from her website or from debutbooks.com.au. Really worth reading. One of the pieces in this is called The Cycle of Inaccessibility. And part of it shares a story similar to this photo of a small country town on the Eyre Peninsula where they said, if you need a ramp to get up the steps, just come in and let us know and we'll bring it out. But the Cycle of Inaccessibility talks about how unusual it can be to see people with disability in places like nightclubs and pubs and airports. And the reaction that people with disability often get when they're seen in places like nightclubs and pubs and airports. And Kelly makes the observation, and this is not going to be a surprise to you, that we don't see these people in these places because they aren't designed for them. They have signs like this. And because they aren't designed for them, they can't get in. And so they can't get in, so they aren't seen there, so people don't design them for them because they don't think they need them. Wheelchair accessible night going out venues are so rare. There are not enough in this town. And if you're a young person with a disability, you want to go to nightclubs. No, many of young people with disability want to go to nightclubs. It's this vicious spiral. A quarter of our population has disability. It is the largest minority group on the planet. But they are often so unseen that the Dylan Alcotts and the Jordan Steele Johns and the Kelly Vincents of the world stand out. And they stand out as being inspiring and so brave. And they can be. But Kelly says this in her book, and I think it's pertinent for schools when they think about how they design their learning. The next time you see a disabled person out in public in a place that surprises you, whether it's an airport or a bar or a university, think about the cycle of inaccessibility. Think about the many reasons why it may be so rare for you to see us independent, happy and connected to broader society. And instead of getting inspired, get really, really angry. It is a really beautiful collection. Really do encourage you to get it. One of the essays is a letter to parents from the perspective of someone who was a child with a disability who went to a special school. And she talks about the importance of parents being your child's voice until your child finds their own. She says, no one is truly voiceless. There are just people to whom we haven't yet learned to listen. Really strongly encourage you to get hold of it and have a read and have a think. Some beautiful poems in there as well, if you like that kind of thing. Another reason for inclusion that you might like to have in your advocacy toolkit is the evidence that comes from academic research. And there are some writers that I've got up there. If you like Googling academics, those people there, Choi, Cole, Oyoung, Rajetsky and Zumsky, have all done really significant studies in the last 5-6 years, which really make it clear that inclusive approaches get better social outcomes for everyone. Disability, not disability. They get better academic outcomes for everyone. Disability, not disability. Inclusive approaches are better for kids. There is a summary of a lot of that research that was that was done by Kate de Bruin in part of Linda Graham's book, Inclusive Education for the 21st Century. There's probably a copy of that over in the library over there. It's a one-chapter summary, really simple explanation of the research evidence says this. If people say, oh, inclusion's bad for people, actually we've got evidence that it's not. We are better together. Now, obviously, it's very easy for me to stand here and say we are better together. It's very easy for me to say, yes, rah, inclusion. But it can be really hard at times because people are complex and kids are complex. And our school systems have mostly been developed or evolved to be adequate for the average. We've designed them around this mythical 50th percentile, and we've already worked out that average does not exist. The cycle of inaccessibility has shaped our schools and our classrooms and moulded our systems. And that's why DPP is changing to inclusive teaching and learning. We want to restructure what we do and rethink how everything works. Now, as nice as it would be if we could just click our fingers and bring in this wonderful new world where everyone fits and everyone belongs and where every classroom is designed in a broad and inclusive and really strong way, we aren't quite there yet. Because there are 30,000 education employees in this state. There are hundreds and hundreds of sites, and every single one of these sites has a different culture, has a different community, has different people, has different learning needs. And just as our classrooms have diverse needs, our schools and systems have diverse needs as well. So the solutions and strategies for inclusion that are right for this spot here, for example, may be very different to a school 5 minutes up the road or 500 kilometres down the road. Schools that are close together or far apart have many things that are similar and many things that are different. And so helping schools change and rethink their practice is a long and complex thing. And the supports and the conversations that you have with the staff at the school where your child attends may be very different conversations to those that you need to have that might be had by the other people at your desk, at your table. And we wish that we could make that easier. That's one of the reasons why we have the conversations like we're having today, so that we can learn how we can more effectively support our schools, so that you guys are able to support your children rather than having to fight for what your children need. We know that there are moments and spaces in our system when schools are incredibly inclusive. We know that there are times when our best teachers have off days. We know that there are times when the stars align and that teacher really surprises you and they knock it out of the park and they do something amazing for your child that transforms their life forever. Now, this is where your input could be helpful as Inclusive Teaching and Learning, ITL, is thinks through how we're going to achieve our goals. And I'm sure that in the coming year there will be more opportunities for more comprehensive consultation, but we've got 5 minutes. And you've already shared some of your hopes and aspirations, even if the technology didn't quite work the way that I wanted it to. But I would like you to reflect on your experience and go back to the Slido. Okay, what are some of the things that can make it difficult for children to be authentically included? And again, think of the words. If you can do it as individual words, we'll get the word cloud up there. I will hide it for a moment. So that but what are some of the barriers to inclusion that you're aware of that you've seen? What are some of and think, environment, community, systems, processes, places, people. I suspect there aren't too many surprises for anyone in this group of people. And I suspect that for the departmental staff, there aren't too many surprises in this either. One last question. If you could click your fingers, and this is where you get to write your sentences and your oh, please, 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 can we do this? If you could click your fingers and change one thing about your child's schooling experience, what would it be? Pick one thing that if you could you saw the Wizard of Oz and it was a magic, doop, what's the thing that you would like to see changed? SSOs, just while you're doing that, access to SSO support is an interesting topic because there's actually, sometimes SSOs are used in classes more to support the teacher than to build skills in the child. And so you might get fewer reports of challenges, you might get the impression that they're getting more done in class, but if the teachers aren't being careful and strategic about how they allocate that support, that can actually be a barrier. That can mean they get less support from the teacher and more from the SSO.
I think also maybe sometimes communication by the teacher on how that's being used.
Okay, yep, communication. Yep, friendship. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to leave that open. If you want to add something else into that, if you think of it later, I'm not going to press stop. I will still see it. I will assume it was already there. And thank you very much for your time. Thank you for participating and coping with my technological stuff. It worked before, I tell you.
Thank you so much, Stuart.